Welcome. All right, it's time. I've been talking about it for a couple of days now, or at least been teasing it for a couple of days now. Ferrari, your time has come. Definitely want to go over some of the details and things that went over at the race. Some of the things that made the race unique. What made this race good. Today we're going to go over a couple of things about the rules in Formula One and how you'll see how I stitch it together, but it's basically how Formula One is going out of their way to please everybody and therefore kind of making the racing worse. There's just a lot of things I want to talk about today. And so, without further ado, let's jump right into it. Today we're going to be building, we're still working on the Ferrari, which is great because today's subject matter is a lot to do about Ferrari. But let's just talk about the race in general first. Some of the things that made that race, fun. One of the things about this year, I think, that we've underestimated is that there's been so much quote unquote domination over the last several years in Formula One that I think we've forgotten about it, what it's like whenever we just don't know who's going to win from week to week. And that's been a lot of fun, going into the race weekend, genuinely not knowing, who's going to be the fastest driver, who's going to be the fastest car, who's going to be the fastest team. So that's genuinely been pretty interesting about Formula One this year, is that we just don't know what's going to happen. And so, that being said, I think it's so important that you get it right. Some of the smaller details, some of the strategy plans. It highlights how important it is for these guys to have, good strategy, good, all the working parts have to be going together on these things. And so, the race weekend in Silverstone was just, I think the atmosphere was amazing. At least it looked like it on television. It wasn't there, obviously, but the atmosphere looks fun. It looked festive. There were a lot of people there. A sold out crowd. It was supposed to be a record breaking crowd, from what I understand. And first, just seeing the different grandstands. Lando's grandstand looks great. With that sea of orange, basically, or not orange, like bright green, basically. That sea of bright green, fluorescent almost. That was cool the way it kind of bent around the corner as well, the way those grandstands did. And so I thought that was pretty neat, seeing that. But as far as the race itself, it was pretty intense, in certain points of the race, beginning, some points in the mid and the end. The Ferraris are doing a really good job getting off of that line. I've noticed, as we've all talked about from the beginning of the year, they're doing really well getting off the line. But what ends up happening inevitably is that turbo, the issues with that turbo, the good about it is that it's going to get off the line pretty fast and spin off pretty quickly. The bad news is, when you get those longer straights, you're inevitably going to get chased down. And unfortunately, this race was the first time in a few weekends that you've actually seen the energy deployment be an issue. Not as much as an issue as everybody thought it was going to be. It kind of started rearing its ugly head towards the mid part of the race. But I think the thought process behind this weekend is that everybody kind of thought that because of the way Silverstone is laid out, it was going to be a terrible, terrible energy management track where they just didn't have a lot of places to recharge the battery. But, as I was saying all week, they've done a really good job of improving this as they went along. I mean, I think the FIA, for all of its faults, did have the right ideas in mind, or not the right ideas. They had progression in mind when they did this. When they started all of this, they had that in mind. So what I mean is they didn't go out of their way to make the racing bad. And so what they've done in the interim is basically look for ways to improve it week to week to week to week. And that's why we've been seeing less and less of a problem with the energy management stuff, at least I believe. And some of that's track specific, of course, but I think they've done a good job of mitigating that and figuring it out. And so the racing has been actually good. And so, or at least fun to watch anyway. But you saw it when Kimmy finally got up to Lewis. There was that moment where there was that moment where it's like almost Lewis's car almost stopped in the middle of the straight, and then right around we go. Um, it's interesting that dependent on where you are on the track, whenever it happens, really kind of determines whether or not you're going to be successful. Like, I think these guys are doing such a good job with the energy management because they're not doing it in a traditional way where it's like I'm trying to collect all of the energy. I'm trying to collect all the energy in one hard braking zone. It's more like we're finding small little areas to collect a little bit of energy, and then deploying it at the right time. I feel like that's a smarter way to do it, and we're starting to see that. We're starting to see that it kind of improves the racing because you're getting little bursts of energy, like almost like a boost button. And so, you know, there have been more creative ways that they've been utilizing some of these boosts, some of these things like that, and I think that's been, I think that's been pretty good. So, okay, so with Ferrari, we have Charles Leclerc, and hang on one second, guys. No, hang tight with me. Da, 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 da. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so Charles Leclerc. Um, so it's so interesting, the commentary in Formula One and how up and down it is. It's like one week we're praising, Lewis Hamilton for all the things he's done over the last several weeks, and then one race where Lewis has a couple of bad, has a bad race, admittedly. Not a great race. I won't say a bad race, not a great race. And suddenly it's like, oh, well, that gap has disappeared now and Charles is this. And it's like, he had a good race. I think that we need to pump the brakes a little bit, so to speak, in every sense of the term about where he's at as a driver. I mean, so far this year, Lewis has been the one, handling business. And you know, whatever you might think about whose team it is still kind of a thing where Lewis has the opportunity to, take the reins in this thing. He's starting to use his setup. Things are going the way that he kind of wants it. And with that being said, I think Charles has to kind of fit into that mold, at least until he can show that he's consistently beating Lewis again. But as this stage of the season progresses, Lewis is definitely the lead. And so with that being said, this race, Charles came out, had a lot of great pace, did a wonderful job. I mean, at one point, I think he was 20 seconds ahead on track, which don't get that confused. You see, and the announcers love doing this. They're announcing, oh, well, he at one point he was 20 seconds ahead of Lewis and everybody else, and it's like, yeah, but kind of. Once you get away from the pack, and Charles had to start pulling away a little bit, 10th at a time. But once you kind of get a second clear and you're past that overtake zone, what happens next is all the cars behind you are in battles. And so while all those cars are fighting, Charles is literally up front and clear air, running his own race. And so it's not as though every car had clear air behind Charles and he was just blitzing the field. Is that he had great pace, but he had open air, literally the whole race. And so, and that's not to take away from he earned that spot. That's not to take away from anything. He earned that spot. But in my opinion, let's not get too crazy with the, oh, well, he was 20 seconds ahead and he was this, and this. I mean, kind of. And so, with him being, with Charles, kind of climbing back into the race or being the lead in this race, he was fast all weekend, guys. I mean, I'm curious if he actually figured something out, or was this just a good track for him? Was this just a good race for him? I'm not sure where he's at in the championships. I'm going to check on that real quick. Let me look at that. So let's look at the championship listings, or championship standings right now. All right, so first let's look at the race. We had Charles first, George second, Lewis third, and Lando fourth. We're going to get into the strategy calls with Ferrari, and we're definitely going to talk about George Russell. But, with the standings as they are right now, Charles is going to need something Herculean, obviously, to climb himself back into this actual title fight. But, what about the fight with his, teammate? So as it stands right now in the standings, we have Kimi in the top spot at 179. George is in the second spot at 154. And Lewis is in the third spot at 147. And so George and Lewis are right there knocking on the doorstep. They can still definitely catch Kimi. It just kind of depends on how the season goes out. It's not nearly as far gone as we thought. Let's put it that way. Charles Leclerc is at 108. So he's about 80. He's about 70 points back. So he's got quite a ways to climb back in. But he's, 40-ish points, 39 points back from he's 39 points back from Lewis right now. So he has the opportunity to maybe kind of pull up on Lewis depending on their form going forward. But I don't know that I would count on that. I think Lewis is very, very motivated whenever he gets into a car that he feels like he can win in. And especially, I think another thing that's understated is when he gets into a situation where he feels like the team is with him. This last year, I don't think that he thought the team was with him. He was very, very down on himself and everything else. And I just don't think he was in a mindset or in a mind place where he thought, he had the backing of the team. Unfamiliar with the new terrain, with the new everything. He definitely has changed that this year. That's 100% different. Right now, Lewis has, it seems, brought the team over to him. And I think it has probably a lot to do with the fact that I think he's letting them know that, hey, guys, if you invest in me just a little bit here, watch what can happen. And so, it's to the point now where Charles is even saying, hey, I've got to move over to this. To this setup as well, or similar setup, because Lewis is doing so well with it. And a lot of that can do with like the new regulations, and we know how Lewis did not get on with the ground effect era cars. And so, only time will tell, but Formula One is so up and down that I feel like it's a weekly basis where they're kind of determining what they want to do. And I feel like Fred Vasseur is the one who's having to thread that needle. Like he he's out there. He's so quiet, and he's such a in the background character, but you can see that he's actually making things happen back there. There were a lot of reports that the changes that Lewis wanted made were not going to happen were it not for Fred Vasseur stepping in and saying, "Hey, this is what we're gonna do." And so, it's interesting to me, you know, what can happen when you put your fate in the hands of a completely different driver. Because of course, if that is true, if Fred Vasseur has been the one to push this forward, and it doesn't work, well then that's kind of the end of the Fred Vasseur thing, right? Um, However, if it does work, you've got a few strong years with Lewis. I don't think it would be realistic to think he's going to be around for several more years, but at least 2 or 3 more, right? So long as he's competitive. I don't see him doing what Alonso does right now, kind of hanging around in the background, hoping for the right car. Very talented driver still, of course, but I mean, I just don't see Lewis hanging around the back of the field. Um, with that being said, they have an amazing opportunity to, one, if Lewis is starting to show signs of development and show signs that he's actually, you know, getting back to the Lewis of old, well, then this is a great opportunity to figure out where you're at with Charles Leclerc. Because if Lewis is Lewis of old, then it would stand to reason that he would be, dominant in that car and would win, 8 times out of 10, 7 times out of 10, something like that, in comparison to his teammate. And so, with that being said, this will be a great barometer to feel like to filter out, not filter out, but to figure out where Charles is at. Because we have to keep in mind they do have Ollie in the background, and that's not going to last forever. Especially with the way the Haas is running nowadays. With Haas not showing a lot of great influence, or not influence, a lot of great with them not showing a lot of additional improvements, let's just say. I'm not seeing a lot of it just yet, and Berman is starting to look as though he is frustrated, or at least sounding like it. Some of the things that are slipping out to the media, his body language is a little bit different, but I think Ferrari definitely wants him in that seat. And so, how long does the Lewis experiment last? That's the first thing to keep into account. Take into account. The other thing about that is obviously the calculus changes completely if they win a championship with Lewis. But let's just say they keep sniffing at the door. Maybe he doesn't win the eighth, but let's just say that he's very competitive and winning. If you've got Lewis in that position, he's dominating in that team. It's a great time for you to figure out if Charles is actually that guy or not. That's when we really have to figure it out, because he's really going to be up against a champion in his in his prime. I mean, we were having a discussion on Apex Noir. We're live every Grand Prix. It's kind of discussing the races, bringing a little culture to it. You know the deal. But we were having a discussion with me and one of the other cast members there, and we were talking about. We're discussing with regards to Ferrari and regards to some of the other team members that are going there. I'm curious if their priorities are going to be matched with either the style, not the style, but if their priorities are going to match exactly what it is they're looking for. So, roll with me for a second on this. All right, so Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc are basically going to be kind of battling it out over the next season, and we're going to get a really good look at where Charles is at. All right. Once we have that picture in mind, the question's got to come up where he's at in comparison to his actual peers, because he's not he shouldn't be compared to Lewis. Honestly, it has nothing to do with how great Lewis is and all that. It's just like he's not really one of his peers. He's not really one of his contemporaries. He should be getting compared to people like George Russell, people like Lando Norris, our current champion, and Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, guys like that. That's the tier of guys that he should be. And we really shouldn't put Lando in that situation. We really shouldn't put Lando in that We shouldn't put Lando in the same boat simply because he didn't win that championship. And as much as myself and plenty of others, I'm sure, discounted that championship due to the way that it came out, I think we're seeing this year that it can't just be you got the fastest car because your teammates right there pushing you too. The other factors that go along with it. And George right now is finding out that it's more than just having the fastest car. You've got to be able to do something really special with it. And without the added benefit of, having an officially named number one driver, like I'm sure George would love, Kimi has been basically showing that he's the one that needs the backing. Every single race, whether it be like this race, George finished second, but nobody really believes that. You know what I mean? Like, we all saw what happened there. Even with George in third, nobody thinks that George was going to survive that last stint. He would have ended up maybe fourth, maybe fifth. Hadjar might have got him too. So it's very, very interesting that with Ferrari, I feel I can't stress it enough. They just have a great opportunity to really figure this thing out. But opportunities come and go because, all right, let's just assume for just a moment that Kimi is everything that everybody believes he is. Let's say he is that generational talent, whether it be this year winning, whether it be a few years later, whatever. Let's just say he is a generational talent. Well, that just puts more pressure. It puts more pressure on Charles Leclerc and Ferrari. And I honestly think Ferrari is one of those teams that doesn't really feel the external pressure like some of the others. They just live on that tradition, because there's been no results at Ferrari at all. Let's look into this actually. So, so if you look at other sports, right? The Dallas Cowboys are the ones who always come in. It wasn't New York Knicks, but they ended up getting that done. But Ferrari reminds me of Dallas, where they live off the tradition of their championship wins, the tradition of their victories, and not the current atmosphere. Because the current atmosphere, Ferrari doesn't feel like a championship team. Ferrari doesn't behave like a championship team. They haven't won one since 2007. They haven't won constructors since 2008. And no, what are we doing? Charles Leclerc was supposed to be the one, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they haven't given them the car that's available or that's capable of winning. They've been close, but sometimes, but not really giving him anything where he can really mount a proper. They've never given him anything close enough where he could actually legitimately fight for the title, and so, again, we glorify Ferrari, and everybody wants to be a Ferrari driver, even if they're not a Ferrari driver. They want to be a Ferrari driver, right? But it's like, at a certain point, when is the tradition not enough? And these guys are ambitious. They want to win. I mean, being a Ferrari driver, just like being a Dallas Cowboys quarterback is more valuable on a losing Dallas Cowboys team than a championship quarterback on some of these winning franchises, just because of the popularity of the team, the location, things like that. A lot of things go into it, and so I hope Charles is one of those guys who is okay sitting still, because of, sitting still because, the comfort of being at the actual team, actually being a Ferrari driver. I mean, that does come with some prestige. I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't. But, it's got to be about winning at a certain point. Like, we got to be about winning. So, in my opinion, we got to be about winning. So, congratulations to Charles. Unbelievable race for him. Congratulations to Ferrari. They gave him the car that can make it happen. Pretty excited about that. Just gives us more hope for the season. So many different cars that are already showing signs of, there's possibilities here, guys. There's so many opportunities for us to, see some really decent racing, to see some championship contenders come out of places that we just didn't see it coming. There's so many opportunities for this year. And, Charles picks up a win. I'm sure that's going to get him excited to kind of push himself a little bit harder, see if he can get more of those. I know Lewis is, excited to get back and have another, get back to those, podium fighting positions, things like that. But as you guys know, Formula One is a very, very large team sport. And, there's people back in the factory, there's people, on the pit wall. There's so much going on all over the place, right? And one of the most important roles that you have as a team is to have somebody who is a good strategist. And I think that we can all, obviously, I mean, the joke is obviously the Ferrari has terrible strategy, guys. Da, da, da. And even when they have quote unquote good strategy, it was interesting to me that we celebrate Ferrari for some of the for the good that they've done, when a lot of the times that was like a circumstantial thing. Like something happened where a pit saved their dumb strategy, like stuff like that. But let's talk specifically about, Silverstone and how they approached this thing. The 5 second penalty that Lewis got, I thought was extremely salvageable. He got it early enough in the race where if he were to pit and kind of get Formula Fiend, what up, bro? Yeah, absolutely. You're at the point where he was so early in the race that Lewis 100% could have pulled that back, like peeled back that 5 seconds. I mean, which he kind of did anyway. Like as soon as he got back on track, he was fast again. But especially if you're gonna go with the strategy they had him on, pit him early, get it done. Get the penalty serve. I know the idea is maybe we just wait for a safety car to potentially come out, but maybe it doesn't. We have that penalty sitting over our head this whole time. You've got to give him the opportunity to kind of pull back and get back into the race. And the Ferrari was fast enough, and I think Lewis was fast enough this weekend. I mean, the results don't really show it, but I really do think Lewis was fast enough this weekend. Maybe he doesn't win, but he definitely deserved the second. He definitely deserved second place. It would have been a Ferrari one too, for sure. And so, you know, they bring Lewis into the pit, and to me, this was the most frustrating part of the race that I've ever. It's the most frustrating thing that I've ever seen, because I don't know if you guys have been to a race live, but if you're actually walking around on pit lane, I was fortunate enough to go on pit lane during the Canadian Grand Prix last year or the year before that, one of the two, and you get to walk behind some of these pit walls, and some of these guys have their screens up already, and there's so much detailed data on those screens. One of which is a stopwatch. And you know how long it's going to take you to get into the pits. You know how long it's going to take you to get out of the pits. You know how long you're going to be stationary. You know to the millisecond how long it's going to take your wheel guys to get the wheels on, off, and out. You know everything about it, all right? You got the computers there. You got the strategists there. How do you not understand, or how do you not know that George is going to end up in front of you? I mean, even if you think that getting the fresh tires on for the last couple of laps, you don't think it's going to take them that long to get the car out of the way. And so, you know what? We'll go ahead and get this thing on. That's fine, but you don't give up track position for that. What part of the game is that? When do you give up track position to force your driver basically to a position where he's going to have to, he gave up his spot. Now he's going to have to pass the driver on track in order to get this thing done in the last stint of the race. Now, we obviously talked about the fact that George's tires were cooked and things like that, but why would you put it up to risk? Why would you leave it up to chance? And exactly what could go wrong did go wrong. They took forever to get that car off the track, and therefore we had no racing laps at the end, and George ends up inheriting the second place. Now, kudos to George. He has been in the interview saying that he didn't feel like he deserved that, which is true. He did not, but at the same time, I think that we're a victim of just like, I've seen a ton of creators, and this is the crazy part, that are like basically essentially like backing up the FIA and their rule sets because they followed the rule, they followed the letter of the law, and it's like, yeah, but the law is stupid. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. And the rule being that once the cars unlap themselves, there must be one full lap before the safety car goes in, or some kind of wording like that, basically where they have to have an additional lap. There was some kind of glitch in the computer where it said basically that he was coming in. We all got excited, but then they were like, "Oh, he's not coming in." Cool, whatever, happens. But I don't want to talk about specifically how that ruined the end of the race, which it did. But let's just talk about the rule set that leads up to this, okay? The first super dumb rule that they have that leads up to bad endings like this is the safety car in general. All right? You have an accident, okay? And people argue with me on this, but nobody has ever been able to give me a straight answer on this. Not one person. Because you can't. You can't justify it. You have some kind of incident on the track, whether it be there's something on the track, debris, whatever, whether it be an accident, whether it be a slow car or a stopped car, something like that. There's a reason to throw the red flags out, or the yellow flags out. All right? So I believe a yellow flag should only be used if it's a temporary car is off the track for a moment. Let's be careful while he gets back on the track, kind of a thing. Something blew onto the track, or marshal's running out there to grab it real quick. We yellow flag it. Something that takes less than half of a lap, maybe a full lap at the most. But after that, what are we doing? We're just driving around the track for no apparent reason. Like, I know that maybe you're thinking, okay, the race can get started a little bit faster if we just creep around the track and let them do their thing. Like, if the tractor has to come out, it's time to red flag this thing. If these guys are going around the track for more than five or more than one lap, what's the point? Like, honestly, nobody can overtake. We have half the teams that get an opportunity dependent solely on track position. Depending solely on track position, you get the opportunity to possibly get a set of new tires on, and your opponent maybe doesn't because they missed the window, right? Like none of that makes sense to me because it just leads to worse racing. That's all it does. It leads to worse racing. What should happen anytime that there's an issue on track, anytime whatsoever? I gotta find a charger. This thing's about number. Anytime whatsoever that you need to slow the race down because there's been an incident, just stop the race. Just stop it. The safety car comes out. He pulls them back into the pit lane, and then they wait. Fix the problem. We go back out. We start from regular racing conditions again. We start from a stop position. We start just like the beginning of the race. More exciting racing. It actually makes sense. And we're not wasting any time behind the safety car. There's no purpose to cars driving around. We're wasting actual laps. That's the crazy thing. So if you look at the lap counter, how many laps there are before the end of the race, and obviously this is because of fuel. I know it's because of fuel. But those laps under safety car conditions are being counted as though they are racing laps, and they are not. And so what should be happening is they should literally, and even if you were going to do it this way, you got to find a way to add more laps at the end so these guys can race to the finish. Like, the question would be, okay, well, you won't have enough fuel for that. Cool. Bring them into the pits for the red flag, make it a red flag incident, all of them. You don't have that issue. If you do have that issue, fine. We don't have enough fuel. Pull them into the pits. Let them refuel. Let the drivers get cleaned up for a second. Let them refresh for a second. Get back in the cars. Get back on the grid in the position that you were in, and you finish the race. Like, I don't understand how this could be. It can't be more obvious. It really can't be. Because you end up at the end of the race just having, what do we have, like 5 or 6 laps under racing? And then the crazy part is they have the nerve to tease us at the end. And the safety car goes in, and he's peeling it as if there's about to be a mad race to the finish line. They're literally a tenth of a second away from the finish line whenever he gets into the pits, and they all jam the accelerator to maybe jump in front of somebody. Like, what are we doing? Like, this is supposed to be the pinnacle. So one of the things that they definitely missed out on, and in my mind, I'm like, you guys missed out on a major opportunity here, is the thing about the Indy 500 this year. They had an incident that forced them into, what do you call it? Forced them into their version of a safety car or whatever, And then they had one lap of racing to determine it all. And that ending was so exciting. Like, I cannot tell you how exciting that ending was, guys. Like, just seeing those guys go for it, everybody's gunning it. That's what racing is about. You want to see these guys under maximum pressure. Like, think about it from everybody's perspective. From Charles' perspective, he From Charles' perspective, he's done everything he needs to do to win the race, and then suddenly he's got company, and so that's his version of it. You've got Lewis, and had they not made their dumb decision from Ferrari because they can't count, he would have had the opportunity to fight for the win. Okay, then you have George, who would have had the opportunity to pull back one of the first and second spaces, and then you had Lando, had the opportunity to get around George. You got Hadjar, had the opportunity to get around George. So many different scenarios could have possibly happened in the end. And we're not even talking about the mid and the backfield. Like, with the mid and the backfield added to the top of that, that could have been one of the crazy, at Silverstone, guys. At Silverstone, that could have been one of the craziest endings in Formula One history. And instead, what we got was cars crossing the finish line at 7 miles per hour. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, the FIA can't be this dumb. Like, they just can't be. Like, there's so many simple ways that you could, within your own rule set, make things happen. And speaking of the rules, did you notice that suddenly we can get all the lap cars out of the way? That's interesting. Now we have time for that. We have the opportunity to get all the cars out of the way. And it's eerily similar. Because, not just because of the fact that, the lap cars and non-lap cars. But think about it. In Abu Dhabi 21, Lewis was 20 whole seconds in front of the pack. And this man was planning his celebration dinner. He done figured out what he gonna wear. He done figured out the after part of the celebration. Like, you ever see an NFL player, he almost to the what's it called? He almost to the touchdown line. He starts celebrating right before he gets to the line. He in his mind, he planning it already. And so I can't imagine where Lewis was in his brain. He was so far ahead in that race. He did the hard part. He literally beat Max. He beat him that day. Now say what you want. Say what you want about the rest of the year. There are different things in the rest of the year. There's a lot of what ifs. But this was the only time all year long where somebody changed the rule in order for somebody to win. And I won't say in order for somebody to win, but this was the only time where somebody changed the rule, which outright determined the order of the race. In other words, somebody picked the winner of the race by doing this, and they knew what they were doing. You can't say, "Oh, well, we gave them a chance." No. You knew what you were doing, and so it's interesting that now, and some will say, of course, they're fixing their mistakes too little, too late. But you've got the cars unlap themselves. That's fine. Once they get past, let these guys race. Because what you're doing whenever those guys unlap themselves is they're not driving at safety car pace. Those guys are gunning it. So if they can gun it, why can't the rest of the pack? Like the rules just don't make any sense. Like, we're just saying things and expecting everybody we'll just go with it because you guys said so. Hey, that's what we're doing here, basically. So I feel as though we're doing a lot of things to appease a lot of people. Okay? One, we have all this sustainable fuel stuff and all these different ways that we're saving energy and things like that. Put an engine in that thing. Make it aerodynamic and let these guys race. You got tires that, are degrading at a specific level of percentages and all this just to make sure that we're being, conscious of the environment, stuff like that. I mean, I don't want to save the environment like everybody else, but I mean, let's be realistic. They got some of the craziest logistics in the world for Formula One. You've got these ships going across seas. How much fuel is that taking to get those ships going, right? You've got these guys flying in private jets, not all of them, but some of them. What's your carbon footprint for that? Some of these guys own jets. What's your carbon footprint for that, right? And so to then turn around and then just make the racing worse because you're trying to look like you're carbon neutral, or you're trying to look like you're trying to, let's say that, like, you're just doing everything. You're doing it visually, but you're not actually doing the thing. It's just a visual thing. You want people to think that you really care when really you don't. And so, one, let's stop with all the justice warrior nonsense. Put an engine in that thing, all right? Make it aerodynamic, make it fast. You can do a lot of that without having to do you can do a lot of that without all the extra stuff. You know what I mean? But now we have MGUKs, MGU whatever. All these things where the battery is having to redeploy. And you guys know me. You guys have seen my content. I don't complain about the regulations. I mean, it is what it is. I don't have to love them, but I also don't complain about it because, I mean, these guys are going to have to figure it out. They're professional racing drivers, But at the same time, now that we said that, we know good and well that their mission to help save the planet is nonsense. The second thing they say is they don't put anything on the cars that don't go on streetcars. Nonsense. 98% of that car is not streetcar usable. None of it. Almost none of that car is streetcar usable. You have to shove a rod up the thing just to turn the thing on. Pause. But it doesn't make sense. It just makes the driving worse. Safety cars. I understand you want to be safe, but everything you're doing makes the racing worse. Just stop the cars and put them in the pit lane. Let them wait. Nobody can give them a reason. Nobody can give me a reason. Yeah, and I agree with Mac James 800. Yeah, I agree. That's what Formula E is for. That's a great point, actually. They literally have an entire series dedicated to that. Literally, an entire series dedicated to that. Let Formula One be Formula One. They're going to use jet fuel. It's going to be terrible for the air quality or whatever, but that's racing. It's racing. That's what it is. If we want to race, that's what's going to happen. We're going to have those things happen. So I agree with you 100%. That's what Formula One is. That's what Formula E is for. And so on top of those two things, you're ruining the racing with silly rules like it's funny. They can be subjective on some rules. Like, for instance, the Kimi Antonelli thing, where he got penalized for track limits. Yeah, he was on track limits, but it was because his car was broken. He wasn't gaining any advantage, and they know that. But they're trying to be on the letter of the law on certain things. Not on all things, just on certain things. And so, ruining the racing with a safety car by having these guys go around several laps under safety car conditions, and then you're telling the cars to unlap themselves. They do so, and they gun it, and they can go full speed, but the rest of the cars can't. Doesn't make any sense. Then you end a race. You end a race under safety car conditions. Stop that. Stop that. Like, why? That doesn't make sense. And so here's the analogy I was making of that. Imagine that you were watching the Super Bowl and Marshawn Lynch had just run 7 to 8 yards to get to the 1 yard line. And instead of seeing the historic play that we saw, the refs call timeout and they say, hey, actually, somebody threw something on the field. We've got to stop the game for a moment to pick that up. While we do so, you guys hang out for a second. Cool. It looks like time ran out. I assume he was going to score, so we're going to go ahead and give Seattle a championship. Would that make any sense? Like, in what world does ending in that scenario make sense? Where you just, you could make the assumption that Charles was going to win for sure, but we also made the assumption that Kimi was going to win several of those races before his car went out on him. We don't know. We also don't get to see. It's like there's no finality to it, Like, we were excited. The race was going well. Everything is happening the way you want it to. You know what I mean? It's getting closer and closer to the end of the race, and then suddenly it's like, all right, pull the plug. And for no other reason than we can, or not we can, but for no other reason than, we're just deciding to care about certain things. Like, there's so many different ways they could approach this, and they don't seem to want to do any of those things. On the flip side of that, yeah, and so the gas thing, I wanted to address the gas thing. Again, stop running meaningless laps. It's so simple to fix. The incident, Max went off. Cool. Safety flags come out. The safety car comes out there. Cool. The yellow flags, safety car gets out there. Cool. He should have taken them straight to the pits. We'd had 6 more laps. 6 laps of racing. They would have been able to switch their tires. We would have had a standing start. So how many positions would have changed just off the strength of that new start? Does Charles get it right again? Or does he not? I don't know. But we got robbed of that. And let's say you don't do it my way. And my other solution is do it like soccer. This wasn't my idea. Somebody else said it in the chat, or somebody said it in the group the other day. But do it like soccer. They got stoppage time. All right, so we wasted 6 laps we wasted 6 laps under these flags. So we're going to go ahead and drop you guys off in the pits, get fueled up for 6 laps. We're running it. That's it. Like these are simple ideas, and I feel like they're being ignored for no other reason than we want to appear as if we are doing good. We want to appear as if we're doing the right thing. And so, you know, due to those silly factors and Ferrari's dumb decision making decision, I'm not done with Ferrari, guys. It's a clock. It's a clock. One of the first things you learn as a child is how to tell time. And these guys are full blown strategists that can't figure out that George is too close for you to put somebody in the pit. Lewis was, Charles was fine. Plenty of time he had the gap. That's the 20 seconds for. You have plenty of time. You're in and out. You know that George is close enough to Lewis that at a minimum, there's a possibility he could pass you in the pit. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? It just doesn't make sense. What are you doing? Look at the clock. Look at the timing sheet. You see how close George. God, I was so shocked, guys. Like I was sitting there watching. I was watching the race, and I'm looking at the timing screen. Of course, because Lewis is in the pit, and then I see George go past him, and I was almost at a loss for words. I thought it was a glitch. I thought maybe something on the timing screen went wrong. How in the world do you let this happen if you're Ferrari? And here's the crazy part. I get the feeling that nobody even from the reports that are coming out afterwards, so they're like, we feel like we made the right decision. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. The spirit of the decision and what actually happened are not the same thing. You might have wanted to do the right thing here. You might have thought that maybe it was a good idea. But the evidence and what happened after tells us that it was not a good idea. Like, why can't you just come out and say, hey, you know what? We went for it. We thought maybe we had the chance to do this and it didn't work out. It was our mistake. But nah, you want to go over here and pretend like it's still good. Oh, we made the right decision because of this. No, you didn't. You didn't make the right decision. You lost your driver a place on the track that he earned after a 5-second penalty, mind you. You know what I'm saying? And so he did all of this, did all that work on track just for your dumb decisions. Your dumb decision. Somebody can't tell time. That's why you cost your driver. Now, flip this. How bad are you going to feel at the end of the year if he loses that championship by 2 or 3 points? You see what I'm saying? Like, it comes down to that. Look at what happened with Lando and Max last year. Max had that opportunity at the end of the year. 1 or 2, and a lot of people point at that incident with him and I forget who the Max had an incident with Lando or George that ended up costing him points at the end. I think it was George. He had that incident with George. Ended up costing him points. And then at the end of the year, you know, he had to rely on something happening outside of him winning on track to win. So every single one of these points is precious. Look at how desperately Kimi wanted that 1 point. How desperately he wanted that 1 point. He was driving that car when it was definitely undrivable. Definitely undrivable. But he was driving that car regardless. And was on the radio basically pleading to keep the car on track because he knows how important those points are. But yet Ferrari seems just fine throwing it away. It just reeks of teams that want to win the right way. You know what I mean? Like, got a championship sitting right in front of you, but you don't want to win it that way. I'm going to win it the way that we want to win it because we were the most important thing here. You know, the Ferrari name is more important than actual winning. It's like, what are you guys actually doing? Because you haven't won anything since 2007. And this is the reason why. You're the laughing stock. I was watching an IndyCar race the other day. And it wasn't the other day, it was a couple weeks ago. But I was watching an IndyCar race. And they took a shot at Ferrari about the strategy nonsense. You know how bad it's got to be for somebody in a completely different series to be talking about how bad your strategy cars are at Ferrari? Like, how is this a recurring issue? And it just means that you're not interested in winning. I feel the same way about Dallas. I feel the same way about my Missouri Tigers. You're just not interested in actually winning. You like appearing as though you want to win, but you don't want to do exactly what you need to do to win. Hannah Schmidt would never have made that dumb decision because she can count. You're a strategist. Strategize. Do the math. And on top of the fact that whenever you opened your mouth to tell Lewis to piss, somebody should have been like, huh? Hold on. You want him to what? Somebody, anybody. Somebody please raise your hand and be like, hey guys, that doesn't seem like a smart idea. George is only not. Hey guys, it's going to take us 12 seconds in the pit. And George is only 10 seconds behind us. Is this a good idea? Somebody, Anybody. Nobody rose their hand and said that. And even worse, if somebody did and they ignored it. It's like, it's just, you can't continue to make decisions like this at this level. This isn't Formula Euro. This isn't Super Formula. This isn't Formula 2. This is Formula 1. It's supposed to be the pinnacle of motorsport. And the flagship team, I can feel comfortable saying Ferrari is probably the flagship team of Formula 1, continually makes decisions that fly in the face of logic. I wish there was more ways for me to explain how dumb that decision was. And I understand the spirit of it. I understand why they did it. But when you look at a clock and you see how close somebody is behind you and you notice there's only 2 or 3 laps left, is there a possibility that they could get laps going again and Lewis could get around them? Sure. But is there a bigger possibility that we could A, end under safety, or B, Lewis can't get around the guy? We don't even know how fast he's going to fire those tires up. You understand that? Like, George he wasn't on fresh tires, man. His tires are old as all get out. But I mean, they're warm and worn in. He's going to be all over the road trying to defend himself. On top of the fact, he's going to have full deployment on that battery. Lewis is going to have full deployment on that battery. Lewis is going to get around him and then get passed again, just like it happened before. So I just can't, on 12 different points on this strategy, it didn't make sense. And I'm not a strategist. I just know how to sell time. How do they don't know how to do that? And if I'm Lewis, you saw the way he got out of that car. You could tell he had it with these people. Stop making my job more difficult. It's bad enough that the car is trash most of the time. We just now getting the car together. And now that the car's finally getting together, y'all want to start acting like this again? You want to start doing this stuff again? Like, it's just, it's not acceptable for a top tier team. It's not acceptable for somebody in that position to make those kind of mistakes. It's unbelievable to me. Question was, do we think Max is leaving? In the rumors. So, I kind of, with the Max thing, I think Max, the problem that Red Bull have is less of a Formula 1 problem and more of a GT3 problem. He's having too good of a time in those other cars. And Red Bull has programs in other series. I could very easily see Max going away and committing a lot of time to GT3 endurance racing, and then coming back a few years later to Formula 1, kind of like Alonso went away for a couple of years, came back. I could see him doing something like that, but only... I'm with Max. He's not going to drive around in the midfield. Like, it doesn't even feel right with Max hanging around. Like, it feels wrong for Max to be so far back because you know it's nothing to do with him. Like, if it were something to where we knew that Max was driving a car that was capable of winning and was just getting outclassed by other people, that's something Max can fight through. He'll figure the car out. He'll get better. But to have Max in the midfield, duking it out with racing bulls and it doesn't feel right. And I know Max isn't there for that. And they're starting to send those little messages through the media. You know, these guys, they don't say it direct. They send it through their team. They send it through their managers in the media. And a lot of the things that are being said are pretty concerning. You know, one of the things being they said Max is not here to race the midfield. And he's not. You know, he's too talented of a driver. I don't want him to waste his prime, you know, sitting around trying to figure out if that team can figure this thing out. And so I think Red Bull knows that, and I think they're going to push hard for him. But I think McLaren feels McLaren has some blood in the water now, you know, which these things are always wild to me because you've got that other driver that's sitting there, you know, you got that other driver that's sitting there thinking to himself, you know, am I going to get a driver or am I not? Is Max sitting right there. You know, so circling back earlier, I lost my train of thought, and I was talking about one of the things that we talked about on the show from this Sunday during the race, which was what driver is safe if Max Verstappen comes around saying he wants to get in that seat? Like, honestly, think about that for a second. Look at all the drivers on the grid. Let me pull them up. We've got, let's see. All right, so I'm going to tell you if I think this driver is safe or not if you had the choice to replace him with Max Verstappen. So, Kimi Antonelli, I think he's safe. I think they believe he's the next. I think they believe he's the next one, and I think he's up. George Russell, gone, immediately, and you have to because it's Max. Lewis, unfortunately, I think you have to go with Max. And I'm a huge Lewis fan, but Max is in his prime still. Max is at the top of his power still, and you can't throw away that opportunity. So he'd have to go. Charles would have to go. Lando, you keep Lando. He's the current champ. He's proven that he can do it in the car. So you keep Lando. Oscar's got to go. I'm sorry. And then after that, you got mid-tier teams, things like that. Of course, all those guys would be sacrificed at the altar, you know, to get that kind of talent. But my point when I said all that is the reason George didn't have that contract signed last year had nothing to do with anything other than the fact that Max was standing there and they were waiting to know if they needed to know whether or not Max was going to be available. And this is another thing where you can bring up you can think about this in NFL terms. Aaron Rodgers, for instance, spent all this time going back and forth on whether or not he was going to come back to the Steelers. And so what the Steelers couldn't do is, hang on. What the Steelers couldn't do was move on and grab another quarterback because they were waiting for Aaron Rodgers to let them know whether or not he was going to play. And so when you have a talent like Max Verstappen that could possibly be on the market, what happens is the market stands still. The market doesn't do anything until Max makes a decision. Because how bad do you look as a team if you go ahead and sign your driver to a long-term contract or another couple-year contract only to find out that Max is available and maybe he was going to come to your team? You know what I mean? And so no team is going to do that. Maybe Ferrari would do it, given their strategy record. Maybe they would. But no other team is going to do that. No other team with any good sense would, because you have the opportunity to pick up an all-time great. And so I think Kimi Antonelli is safe, and I think Lando Norris is safe, but nobody else on the grid is actually safe. Look at how Mercedes handled the Lewis exit. Just on the sheer possibility that Max could be available, they basically found a backdoor to push Lewis out of. And sure, Lewis made the decision, but he only made that decision because he wanted a one and he didn't want that 1-1. He wanted a 2-year contract with some ambassador roles. For them to turn around and say, "Nah, we're not going to give you that. We'll give you a 1-1, and we'll offer Max that ambassadorship." You see what I mean? And so, and you got to keep in mind that Mercedes wanted Max in the first place before he went to Red Bull. Max is really the reason why this young resurgence of drivers is happening in the first place, because Max came in so early and was so talented and did so well so young. Basically, he was pushed into that position, and then he caught fire. Started driving well, started pushing the limits right away, was competitive. And then here comes the driver like Kimi Antonelli. Mercedes can't make that same mistake twice. So they push him right past Formula 3, right into Formula 2, which he didn't do great in, part of his car, and then right into the seat. And they had to do that. When really their development pattern is you take the driver, you get him out of the junior series, you bring him into the lower tier teams like a Williams, for instance, a la George Russell. They build themselves up. Look at Ali Berman right now, and then eventually they get into one of the main teams. And so, that was the plan all along with Kimi. George is kind of in no man's land. This year was his opportunity. This year was George's opportunity to really secure his seat. Because if he goes on, let's just say the roles are reversed right now, and he's giving Kimi the work right now, right? If that's happening, George is signing a longer term contract than what he's signing right now. Because you've got somebody in your stable that can win. And so I feel like Ferrari throwing away these points flies in the face of everything that Lewis Hamilton stands for, because a champion of that stature does not become this way by giving away points. And Lewis knows that. That's the crazy part. How many championships has Lewis lost by 1 or 2 points? Honestly, think about that. Lewis could have, he's a 7-time world champion. He could have 9, something like that. Think about that. Some of these DNFs that happen, some of these circumstances on track. It happens to everybody, obviously. It is what it is. But you just got to think, all of these points are precious. You cannot throw them away. You can't. You can't give away points on silly things like I can't look at the clock. Like that's just unbelievable to me, and it should be unacceptable. I feel like I hope that internally Ferrari's having conversations about how that can't happen again, and maybe removing the strategist from the strategy role. Hopefully, they're doing that. But you know, that's Ferrari for you. All right, so a couple of other things. The Lego thing. The Lego is like they do silly things, things that just don't make sense. You go through all of this. You go through all the trouble of building that Lego car, getting the drivers in there. Lewis ain't want to do it, and getting them out there. You go through all that only to show us a couple of seconds, and then make us watch it on social media like little clips. Show us the whole thing. What else are you doing in that hour before the show? I'm confused. Where is the producer? You're producing a show and you have content, but you don't want to use it? You're gonna make your commentary crew figure out things to talk about when you have a literal thing that you could be showing? Everybody would be excited to see that. And then Mohammed bin Salayim. Bro, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, like, yeah, we all wanted to see it. What? I was so frustrated about that because I don't typically sit around. I get up and 3 or 4 minutes before the race starts, I jump in. Like I don't really prep. I just jump in. I'm going. And so I found out that Lego was going to be doing this thing, and so I'm like, I'm gonna purposely watch the entire hour production just for this Lego segment. And the Lego segment was 2 or 3 clips. I mean, literally 2 or 3 clips. And they showed us a couple of things, and that was it. And then went on to the next thing. What are you talking about? The whole purpose of that hour show is to drive more interest towards the race. Where you're going to get your drivers, which I thought Drivers' Wife taught them this. I thought that they taught them this. The more popular your drivers are, the more people watch. Well, right now, your drivers, you got to keep in mind, your drivers are on the track with helmets on. Nobody gets to see their faces for 99% of the race. And so the car is the star, technically. The liveries, the team name, that's the star of the show. Same thing in the NFL. You can't see their faces. That's why they're not recognized as global stars like that, right? Well, you had the opportunity. Because none of them had no helmets on in that Lego car. Right? Right? Muhammad, instead of figuring a way to weasel yourself into one of them cars, maybe you could have weaseled yourself into the production meeting. How about that? How about you sneak yourself up there? Get up in the production meeting and tell them, hey, maybe we should show the footage that we have. We have the footage. There were cameras. A lot of them, I would assume. You caught every single inch of it. Pause. But you didn't show it? Explain it. I'm not a strategist, and I'm also not a producer. But if I was in charge of production, let's just for a second, just stay with me for a second. I'm in charge of production of Formula One just for a moment. All right, chill out. All right, feel free to take notes, FIA. All right, guys. So in the meeting today, we talked about how we're all going to be in Lego cars. We're going to be in Lego cars for at least a half a lap to a full lap. So at least let's say 20 minutes of good, solid, fun footage. And I'm going to have that footage. And I've got an editor who edits really fast. Yep. Hey, so what should we do with that footage? Just sit on it. We don't need it. Put a couple of clips on social media. Nobody wants to see all this Lego nonsense. Let's not put it there. What? What do you mean? Of course we want to see this. It's so popular because last year when they did it, everybody had a blast. You know? Lewis makes a decent point. You know, no, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. I tried to say it with a straight face. Lewis doesn't make a decent point. From what I understand, he was not happy with the fact that they were going to have to do the Lego driving because that's more things they have to do and they're not getting paid for that. And that's the same Lewis Hamilton who sat there with a straight face and said that people have too much money. Now, Lewis, I support you in just about everything, brother, but that's ridiculous. And you know it. Especially given the outfit he was wearing when he said that ridiculous thing. And then they come around and say, hey, we're not getting paid to do these cars, so I'm not sure if we should do these Lego cars because we're not getting paid. I don't know, man. Seems like seems a little bit hypocritical. But I think the most important thing to come out of this is that they need a better production crew. Like it's almost like they're when the Drive to Survive thing happened, and this was years and years and years ago now. So you'd think that they figured it out, that they would have put a more professional crew on this, right? Like how many years did it take them to fix Monaco? Like where they didn't even have an idiot, they couldn't even negotiate the rights to record it. Like like speaking of being in charge, like how do you mess that negotiation? I'm like, well, we have our people recording it. Well, we're not racing there then. You imagine ESPN showing up to your city to play a basketball game, and you telling us your little production crew, gonna run my NBA game that's global? No, you're not. No, you're not. And so I'm bringing my camera crew and I'm doing my thing. That's the production. That's what production is all about. And so you have something that doesn't even have to be highly produced. That's the crazy part. You literally just have to have somebody with the camera following them around, having fun in the Lego cars. You know what I mean? Like even Muhammad's crazy behind being sleazy behind being in front of there with the cars, right? Right. That's even good content because you know people gonna be mad about it, and so you know people gonna be mad about him being up there. Put a camera on him, record it, show it. You're desperate. You make us sit through these little interviews you put the drivers through, asking them dumb questions. But then you ask them these dumb questions, but then you have footage that people actually are dying to see, and you don't show it. Y'all dropping the ball on like 50 different levels. It doesn't make sense. And so what my point was, whenever you have something that's as popular as Formula One has become due to Drive to Survive, you got to strike where the iron's hot. You have to find every single way because they found several ways to make more money now that they're more popular. I think we all would agree on that. They've found many ways. Y'all, the prices for some of this team merch at the races, it's obscene. The cost of the seats, the cost people spend just on that weekend. It seems as though Formula One has a production problem from missing obvious things like showing footage that people are asking for, like the radios no longer being really a part of the show at all. They're there, but not nearly as much as they used to be, the driver's radio. The awful way in which the production crew chooses what footage to show when, like when to show the race replay in the middle of a battle. There's a literal battle for first place happening. Like, let's show you the race restart. Of all times, now I'll show you the race restart. Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. And so they make tons of production errors, like tons of them. And it just seems as though they do things that are counterproductive to success. And they're throwing a ton of money at it. Liberty Media is. You would think that they would put a more professional outfit on it. It just, as a fan of the sport, you want to see good racing, and you want to see fair racing, and you want to see a good production. You want to see a good show. One of the things the UFC is so well known about is just their production. And I will say Formula One does a good job live races. Those races are a lot of fun when you go out there. But you hear about how fun Indy is. You get to see things like a one-lap shootout at the end, which was incredible at the Indy 500. You're seeing, I'll tell you what, thank you so much for the heart hand thing. I'm not sure if that was hand heart. Thank you for the hand heart. You get the idea that they're more interested in pulling in the financial aspects of it than improving the product. And I want them to make as much money as possible. I'm not one of the people that say they make enough money. I think they should make more. The races are incredible. What they're doing right now, unbelievable what they're doing behind the wheel of that car. So I think they should make more, not less. But what are we doing with that? Like, what's the investment like? Like, take that money that we're giving you and give us a better product. Find ways like for instance, last a couple like 3 or 4 years ago, Mercedes came out with those zero pods. You remember that? Came out with zero pods, and of course, it was a disaster. So what did they do? They bit the bullet and eventually said it's not working, and they pivoted. Well, when this year started, or when they introduced these regulations, we knew that there were these issues. These issues have these. This isn't a surprise. We knew it was happening. Why couldn't the FIA just turn around and say, you know what? We need a couple more years of the regulations we have now, or we need to make a couple of more tweaks. We can't do this because of these reasons. Like, you knew it was going to go on and you did it anyway. Because it was better for money, it was better for your image. So, you know, imagine for a second that you bought a ticket to that race and you're on the edge of your seat for the entire race and then Max crashes. Thank God he's okay. And then we finish the race under a safety car. That's not what you spent all that money for. It's not. You went there to see a race. And then you have things like the FIA, for instance, having their after race rulings. It still makes no sense to me how you make rulings after the race is over, and so Lewis could end up off the podium, off out of the points completely due to a silly thing that they can't make a decision on right away. Have him go through the ceremony and everything for no reason. I feel as though the FIA could use a helping hand, and Ferrari's strategy team. You know what they should do? Ferrari should do a thing where you run a contest and you put in an essay or whatever, and you have them watch a random race and say, hey, what is the strategy you want to do for this race? And just pick 5 or 6 guys to kind of give you some strategy, and then the winner gets to sit on the pit wall and slap your hand if you try to put me in the pit lane when a car is right behind me. I don't need to be the strategy for anything else. Just let me sit beside you and just, no. That's what needs to happen. What are you talking about? So, it's dramatic, and I understand that. But these points, they're hard to come by. And if Lewis ends up losing this title by 1 or 2 points at the end of the year, this is going to be one of the reasons why. And I don't know. I don't know that I want to be the person on the pit wall that is the reason why Lewis doesn't get his 8th. I don't want to be that person. So Lewis needs to have a discussion with the strategy team. FIA needs to call me because y'all need help. And Ferrari needs to call me too because y'all need help. Thanks for joining me on this live, guys. This is technically podcast number 3 or number 2.3, whatever you might call it. If you're not following me right now on social media, please do so. You can follow me here, and you can find me at Outlap Critical on YouTube as well. And so follow me both of those places, and we'll catch you guys in the next race. See you soon.